Hello and welcome to Simply Balanced, the podcast where we dive into, all things balanced. I'm your host, Taylor Grosso, a registered dietitian with a passion to helping you find your unique Balance Girl aesthetic in this often hectic world. Each episode will explore different facets of living a balanced life, whether it's unraveling the latest nutrition trends, discovering mindful eating strategies, or discussing tips for a balanced lifestyle that fits your routine. Balance isn't about perfection, it's about making choices that feel right for you, nurturing your body and mind, and enjoying life's simple pleasures. So whether you're sipping your morning coffee, heading out for a walk, or winding down for the evening, I'm thrilled to have you join me. So let's dive in and talk, all things balanced. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Simply Balanced. As always, I am so glad that you are here. This is one of my favorite parts of my job, and I'm so excited to chat about all things nutrition this week because we're going to kind of take it back to the basics. I feel like I've done a lot of podcast episodes on a lot of different topics, but what I realized that I haven't really done is given like a nutrition 101 overview. So what we're really going to dive into today is the macronutrients and how they benefit your body. Because as you know, around here, we like to talk about addition versus restriction, right? Like we're not talking about dieting. We're talking about how to empower women to understand how food fuels their body in a positive way. And I think one of the bases for that is having the knowledge of like, what do the macronutrients actually do for my body and how do I incorporate them into my diet so that I'm using them in a positive way and that they're fueling me in a positive way. So let's dive in and talk about all of the different macronutrients and how they benefit your body in a positive way. So let's start off strong with my favorite macronutrient to talk about because it's the internet's favorite macronutrient to demonize. I think we all know exactly what macronutrient I'm talking about, and that is carbohydrates. Now, what exactly are carbohydrates? Because I think that there's a lot of confusion and misconception on the internet. I see it a lot, especially in like influencer wellness culture, where I'll hear an influencer say something along the lines of, I cut sugar and I feel so good. And then you'll go look in the comments and a lot of people will be like, well, do you still eat carbohydrate-based foods? And they're like, yes, I still eat things like potatoes and sweet potatoes and whole wheat bread or sourdough. So yes, I still eat carbohydrates. I just don't eat sugar. But all carbohydrates in their simplest form are going to break down into glucose, which is sugar. So essentially, no matter what type of carb you're eating, you are eating sugar in its simplest form. However, before everybody gets angry with me, there is a difference in the way that the two different types of carbohydrates actually impact our blood sugar. Now, I talk a lot about blood sugar balance on my page because in my opinion, that's like the magic key to long-term sustainability when it comes to nutrition and learning how to eat rather than how to diet. I think that all boils down to blood sugar balance and how can we create more balanced plates and power-packed snacks in order to feel more satisfied, satiated, and energized. And what that boils down to is these carbohydrates. And there's a difference in the two categories. We have simple carbs and we have complex carbohydrates. So complex carbohydrates are going to contain more protein and fiber. It's things like whole grains, so oats, whole wheat bread, whole wheat pasta, brown rice. Anything that could be classified in that whole grain category is going to fall under complex carbohydrates. We also have some fruits, we have some vegetables, we have a variety of beans and legumes in there as well that are providing us with not only that carbohydrate source, so that energy source, but it's also providing us with both protein and fiber. And that's really the biggest differentiator between the two categories because simple carbohydrates are just carbohydrates. There's rarely any fiber and there's rarely any protein in simple carbohydrates. Now, why this impacts our blood sugar differently boils down to how the food is digested. So when we eat a more complex carbohydrate source that contains a little bit more protein and a little bit more fiber, protein and fiber actually help to slow down the digestion of the carbohydrates, which means that it enters our bloodstream at a slower rate than something like the simple carbohydrates. This is why you may have heard before, like having a simple carbohydrate is more beneficial when you're close to a workout, like 30 to 60 minutes before, have a simple carb, don't have something that has as much protein and fiber. The reason for that is because those more simple carbohydrates, because they don't have that protein and fiber, they're going to digest super freaking fast. And then we're going to be able to utilize them as energy very, very quickly. So once again, that biggest differentiator between those two categories is the amount of fiber and then the amount of protein. Some foods that fit into that simple category, we have some fruits that fit into there. We also have things that like your traditional carbohydrates that people think about. So things like white bread products, white pasta, white rice. We also have things like candy and cake and pastries, things like soda, fruit juice. All of those different things are more simple carbohydrates because at its core, it's really just providing us with that carb source or that sugar source. But what we also need to clarify here, because I love to talk about this on the internet, our brain and body's main source of energy is carbohydrates. Like that is the preferred and main source of energy that our body loves to utilize. Not only is it our brain's preferred source of energy, and our brain alone requires 130 grams of carbohydrates per day. Per day. So if you're tracking macros and you're tracking calories and you're exercising and your carbs are at 130 grams or lower, you're barely even providing your brain with enough energy, let alone your body, which is what we use as main forms of energy for exercise, especially high intensity exercise. It's also the only form of energy that our red blood cells can use. So as you can see, our body really likes to use carbohydrates as its main source of energy. Not only this, but like, did anybody else see the video? I shared this on my Instagram page, but Carnivore MD came out and he was like, yeah, after like doing quite a few years of the keto diet, I came to realize that like long-term ketosis is probably not beneficial for human health. Like, yes, sir, we've been saying this for how many years? And by we, I mean us as dietitians have been constantly trying to get people out of this mindset that carbohydrates are bad for you. It's about figuring out how to eat rather than how to diet, and how to pair these carbohydrates with protein, fat, and or fiber to balance out your blood sugar levels in a positive way. And now I want to kind of go back a little bit, because I mentioned in terms of a really big benefit as carbohydrates being the main energy source is carbohydrates for physical activity. So a lot of the times when we think about physical activity, we think about obviously needing like protein after you're done exercising. But not only do we need carbohydrates before we exercise in order to provide our body with that energy it needs, especially if you're doing some form of high intensity exercise, because our body utilizes both carbohydrates and fat as its primary energy source when we're moving our body. However, the higher the intensity or the faster your heart rate is, the more your body is going to prefer carbohydrates as the main source, which makes sense when we think about the way in which carbohydrates are digested and utilized as energy. It's a lot easier and it's a lot quicker than converting fat over to energy. So when you're moving at a very intense pace where you need energy very quickly, your body is going to burn through more carbohydrates. Versus when you're exercising at a lower intensity, it's easier for your body to use more fat as its main source of energy because it has more time to turn that energy over, because you're moving at a slower pace and you don't necessarily need energy quite as quickly. But what that all has to do with in terms of physical activity as well is that post-workout, you definitely need protein, which we'll get into, but you also need carbohydrates. When we eat a carbohydrate, it's broken down into glucose. Like I mentioned at the beginning, it's broken down into that sugar form. One of the places that it's actually stored is in your muscle tissue. It's stored as glycogen, and then glycogen is later converted into something called ATP, which is essentially just energy. So what we want to make sure that we're doing is, especially if we're doing high intensity workouts where we're probably burning through those glycogen stores in our muscles, we have to make sure that we replenish that. Because if you are only eating protein, especially if you're under eating and not getting enough total energy, a lot of that protein is not necessarily going to get to go to your muscle to help it rebuild, repair, and regrow. But when we have a plentiful amount of total energy and a plentiful amount of carbohydrates, the carbs can go into refuel those glycogen stores, and protein can actually do what it's supposed to do, which is repair, rebuild, and recover our muscle tissue. So making sure that you eat both carbs and protein after exercise is absolutely crucial in order to make sure that your body has enough energy and also recovers to its optimal benefit. Now, outside of carbohydrates being the primary energy source for our body, it also contains dietary fiber. Now, fiber is like the biggest word of 2024. Like, I feel like 2023 was really cottage cheese. Like, she had her moment. And then now in 2024, we're talking a lot more about fiber. And I think that it's absolutely incredible that we're talking more about fiber because she's underrated. She's very underrated. Only 5% of Americans get their recommended daily amount of fiber. And honestly, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we are so scared of carbohydrates because that is where fiber comes from. It's from carbohydrate sources. Specifically, things like whole grains are going to be packed with dietary fiber. And then we can also find it pretty often in fruits and vegetables. Now, some fruits and vegetables are higher than others. Like, for example, berries, pears, I'm trying to think, like apples are all really good sources of fiber. So we want to make sure that we're emphasizing adding in more of these fibrous foods into our diet for many, many reasons. One is that fiber is going to make our meals more satisfying and satiating. Like I mentioned, it slows down the digestion of the carbohydrates, so it's going to make us feel more full and satisfied from our meals and snacks based on the amount of fiber that we're getting. And I always like to say that women need 25 grams of fiber per day, and men were aiming to 38 grams of fiber per day. So women, this is like one category where we have it a little bit easier than men. We only have to get 25 grams of fiber instead of 38. Like, that's pretty nice because really, when you think about it, 25 grams of fiber, it's not that much, but it also is hard to get a lot of fiber in food. Like I was mentioning when I said like berries and pears, for example, have a high amount of fiber. I'm talking like 5 or 6 grams per serving. It's not like when we think about protein, where when you think about a high protein item, you're probably thinking like 20, 25 grams of protein, right? That's not necessarily what we're talking about when we're talking about fiber, which is why adding more whole grains, fruits, vegetables, beans, and legumes to your diet is so beneficial to increase that fiber consumption. Now, not only does it benefit your overall like satisfaction and the satiation that you get from meals, but it also plays a major role in gut health and digestion. Everybody is out here wanting to improve our gut health, and one of the best ways that you can do that is by increasing the amount of fiber that you're consuming, because fiber is a prebiotic, which means that it feeds the beneficial probiotics that exist in our gut microbiome. So we have billions of bacteria that exist in our gut microbiome. And what we're seeing more and more in science and research is that our gut is our second brain. It's connected to so many different things in our bodies. And when we are able to provide our gut with a variety of nutrients and with a variety of different vitamins, minerals, prebiotics, the probiotics are going to thrive and multiply. And that means that we're going to have a healthier gut microbiome. So incorporating more fiber is a great way to improve your gut health. And not only is it a prebiotic, so it's feeding those beneficial probiotics that exist in your gut, but it's also going to help you poop, which is something that we talk about a lot on here when I talk about having a metabolically healthy body. A metabolically healthy body poops every single day. Like, you need to be going to the bathroom at least once a day. And you know what's going to help you do that? Fiber is going to help you do that. I get a lot of questions on fiber supplements, so I did want to kind of touch on that just for a second. And what I always like to say about any supplement, it does not matter, like protein supplements, fiber supplements, any type of supplement, I always say food first, supplement second. So if you are really struggling to get in your daily fiber because you don't like a lot of fruits and vegetables, you really don't like whole grains, I think a fiber supplement can be helpful, but I'm always going to recommend food first and then supplement second for literally any macronutrient or any type of supplement. Now, outside of both the prebiotic, probiotic situation helping you poop, one other big benefit of dietary fiber is that it actually benefits your heart health and your blood sugar control. So we've already talked about the blood sugar control a little bit, but fiber can actually help to decrease LDL cholesterol. You guys know I don't like to use the words good and bad around here, but that's like the one way that we talk about LDL cholesterol, and I don't really have a better way to talk about it or like a better word for it. LDL is known as your bad cholesterol and HDL is known as your good cholesterol. The reason that LDL is known as the bad cholesterol is because what we see is a correlation between high LDL levels and cardiovascular disease or cardiovascular events like a heart attack. So decreasing that LDL and increasing that HDL is really important. Something that can help with that is dietary fiber. That's why you might have seen, like, if you remember this when we were kids, like I know it's still on the boxes, but I used to see it when I was a kid and be like, I don't know what that that means. Like the Cheerios box, for example, says helps to lower cholesterol, or you see that on things like oatmeal. A lot of that boils down to the fact that these are very high fiber, whole grain foods. So eating them consistently over time can help to lower that LDL cholesterol because of the way in which fiber helps with our overall cholesterol numbers. Now, to wrap up carbohydrates, I just wanted to mention, I know I already kind of said it at the beginning, like the difference between simple and complex carbohydrates, but a couple of different sources that you can really add into your diet. I just want to hit that home. So we have whole grains. I always like to aim to make about half of my grains whole grains. So there are certain things like rice, for example, where I just really prefer jasmine or basmati rice, but I love whole wheat bread. I don't mind whole wheat pasta at all. I feel like it tastes very, very similar. I love oatmeal. It's one of my favorite foods. So I try to do at least half of my grains whole grains, but if there are certain things where I just prefer the white product, like rice, for example, then that's what I will buy because I know that I'm getting it from those other sources, fruits and vegetables, and then also things like beans and legumes. So chickpeas, black beans, kidney beans, great northern beans, lentils. Why did I just struggle so much with saying that word? Lentils are another really great source of dietary fiber, not to mention that beans are packed with plant-based protein, and they are also very, very, very cheap as compared to like meat as a protein source. So another really great addition that you can add to your meals in order to increase that nutrient density and add in more fiber. So now that we've talked about my favorite macronutrient, we're going to go into the internet's favorite macronutrient, which is protein, right? Like think about the amount of products that you see at the grocery store that have added protein. Like there's protein chips, there's protein cookies, there's protein cinnamon rolls, protein Pop-Tarts. People love to add protein to anything and everything. And what I find to be like really kind of funny about this is the fact that we are really obsessed with protein, but a lot of the times, like, we're getting enough of it. It's just about learning, once again, how to add proper proteins into your diet in order to increase that nutrient density. So protein can be defined as kind of the building blocks for our body. So protein in its simplest form breaks down into what is called amino acids. The reason I like to talk about it like building blocks is especially for exercise is a really great example. When you exercise, you make teeny tiny little tears in your muscle tissue. And then when you eat protein, it breaks down into those amino acids, which then go back into your muscle tissue and kind of work like Legos, where it helps to build that tissue back up. And then that's what helps it to repair and grow so that you actually see growth of your muscle tissue over time. So one really big thing with protein is that obviously if you are an active individual, it is incredibly important to make sure that you are getting enough protein. And especially if you are trying to build or gain muscle, this is one of the best ways that you can do it is by increasing that protein consumption at your meals and snacks. Like I mentioned, it's essential for the growth, maintenance, and the repair of tissues. Another thing that a lot of people don't talk about when it comes to protein is that it's actually really beneficial for enzyme and hormone production as well. So enzymes do a variety of things in your body, but one thing that I love to talk about with enzymes is that they actually help us to break down our food. So like lactose intolerance is a great example. When you're lactose intolerant, it just means that you're lacking the enzyme called lactase that helps to break down that lactose into smaller molecules to make it more easily digestible. So protein is actually really important for a variety of things in our body, but I feel like we always talk about it in the sense of building muscle, which obviously, yes, very important for that, but it's also very important for a variety of other things in the body. Not to mention that it's actually critical for our immune health as well. So if you're looking to like increase your immunity in the winter, I always recommend like zinc, vitamin D, and then making sure that you're prioritizing and getting enough protein. Like think about that around the Christmas and Thanksgiving season. How many people get sick during that time of the year? And what are we usually doing, right? Like we're eating foods that we don't normally eat. We're probably not prioritizing protein as much. We're also interacting with a ton of different human beings. So those are always some of my biggest tips is that wherever you can get in protein, like during that sick season, make sure that you're adding that in because it is going to help your body repair, heal, and recover a lot faster. And it's also hopefully going to help to prevent some of those sicknesses as well. Now, protein, actually all macronutrients can be divided into two separate categories, which I find to be really interesting. Like I talked about with carbohydrates, there's the simple and the complex carbohydrates. When we talk about protein, we can talk about complete and incomplete protein. So complete protein means that it contains all 9 essential amino acids. Essentially, there are these amino acids that we do not make, like our bodies do not make them, so we have to get them from our food. Animal-based products are all going to contain the 9 essential amino acids. So you have things like lean meats, fish, egg, dairy, and then there's also a couple of different plant-based options that are actually complete proteins. So any soy product, tofu, tempeh, edamame. Edamame is such an underrated protein source, not to mention that it's also packed with dietary fiber. I love having like shelled edamame at a sushi restaurant in order to increase my protein consumption. And then I also love adding dry roasted edamame to like trail mixes or just honestly snacking on it as a super easy, like salty, crunchy snack. It packs like 13 grams of protein per 1/3 cup serving, which is actually so good for like an easy, crunchy, delicious snack. Plus, I love dry roasted chickpeas too, but dry roasted edamame is far cheaper than chickpeas, which is lovely. So those are all going to be things that are complete proteins. There's a couple of other plant-based ones like quinoa, and then what's the other one I'm thinking of? Oh, pistachios. Pistachios are another one that is a plant-based complete protein. Now, like I said, there's the two categories. So then we also have incomplete proteins. So incomplete proteins contain some, but not all of the 9 essential amino acids. A lot of the times these are plant-based proteins. So we think about things like nuts and seeds, right? Like peanut butter, for example, has protein in it, but it just doesn't contain all 9 essential amino acids. We also have things like beans, which are packed with those plant-based protein, but just don't have all of it. Things like whole grains, like I said, whole grains do have more protein, but they're not necessarily going to be a complete protein source. So one of the best things that I emphasize to vegans and vegetarians is making sure that you're getting in a variety of plant-based sources so that you're making sure that you're getting a variety of those essential amino acids from all of the different sources that you're consuming. So those are all of the different ways in which protein benefits our body, and then all of the different ways that you can kind of add it in, and those two different categories of those protein sources. And then last but not least, we have another macronutrient that I feel like the internet still kind of tries to like demonize a little bit, which is fats. Like we also kind of, well, if you were born around the same time I was born in 97, and I feel like in the early and mid 2000s, it was really the low fat era. Like everything that my mom bought was like fat free or low fat. Like I'm still scarred. I remember the Pringles. There were these like sour cream and onion Olestra Pringles. They would just wreck your stomach, but they were fat-free chips. And that was just like what we knew at the time. It was when we thought that eggs impacted our cholesterol. Like we just thought that fat was incredibly bad for us. However, fat is incredibly important. And once again, there's two different categories of fats as well. There's unsaturated fat, and then there's also saturated fat. So unsaturated fat is going to be health promoting or heart promoting fats is what I like to call them. A lot of people like to call these good and bad fats, but once again, I don't like to use that terminology. So when we're talking about unsaturated fats, the reason that I call these health or heart promoting is because unsaturated fats can actually help to increase that HDL cholesterol that we talked about earlier. HDL cholesterol is heart protective, meaning that it's going to help to support your heart health and increase that HDL cholesterol or decrease your risk for cardiovascular disease, versus saturated fat is more so correlated with an increase in that LDL cholesterol and a higher potential for those cardiovascular disease-like events. So we want to make sure that we're emphasizing more unsaturated fats and just moderating our intake of saturated fats. So foods that fit into that unsaturated fat category are things like avocados, nuts, seeds, olive oil, and then fatty fish. So things like salmon, for example. Foods that fit into that saturated fat category are things like lard, butter, ghee, coconut oil. So you can also see the difference in terms of like the oils, that in saturated fats, they're all going to be solid at room temperature versus unsaturated fats are going to be liquid at room temperature. So that's kind of an easy way to differentiate between like cooking sources of fats, but obviously things like avocados, nuts, seeds, like those aren't liquid at room temperature, but you guys know what I mean. And then in terms of the ways that fat benefits our body. So number one is that it's actually a very dense source of energy. So when we talk about like the breakdown of food, most of them are 4 calories per gram. So let's say like on a food nutrition facts label, you see something that's 20 grams of protein. Because it's 4 calories per gram, 80 calories of that food are coming from the protein. Carbohydrates are the same, 4 calories per gram from every gram of carbohydrates, but then fat is 9 calories per gram. So fat is going to be the most energy dense macronutrient, which means that when you include fats at your meals, they're likely going to make them more satisfying and satiating because they're going to increase not only the nutrient density, but then also the energy density that's along, like on the meal. And outside of it being a energy dense source of nutrients, it also is really important for fat soluble vitamin absorption. So a lot of the times people, especially when they're dieting, will eat a salad without dressing or without anything on it, which I used to do this as well, and it doesn't taste good, first of all. Second of all, dark leafy greens, so things like spinach or arugula or I already said spinach or arugula, these types of like dark leafy greens, those types of foods are where we can find these rich vitamins and minerals or those fat soluble vitamins. Fat soluble vitamins are reliant on a fat source for our body to be able to absorb them optimally. So when you eat something like a salad and you're skipping out on that salad dressing, you're actually skipping out on a lot of vitamins and minerals that could come from that salad. Now, you're not going to miss out on all of them, but you're going to get so much more out of it by having some sort of fat source on there. So whether you sprinkle on some nuts and some seeds, or you put on some salad dressing, you put on some sort of like avocado or fatty fish, this is just going to not only increase that nutrient density, but also make sure that you're absorbing those fat soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. Not to mention that fats are also really important for cognitive function and mental health. And then a couple of different like healthy fat sources that you can add into your diet are things like avocados, nuts, seeds, olive oil, and fatty fish. Some really easy ways that I love adding in fats into my diet are through things like nut butter. I love to add it to my smoothies. I add it to my oatmeal bowls. I love to add it to my yogurt. That's a big one that I share on TikTok all the time, that everybody, when they try it for the first time, is like, holy cow, this is so good. But if you've never tried mixing peanut butter into like vanilla or strawberry yogurt, cannot recommend enough. Like, it tastes so freaking good, and it just adds like a salty sweet flavor, but emphasizes adding in more of that nutrient density. I also love adding things like hemp seed or chia seed to my oatmeal. Once again, adding it to my yogurt bowls. Sometimes I'll put it on top of my pancakes or my waffles when I make those. You can also make things like chia pudding. For me, it has kind of a weird texture, so it's not like my thing that I tend to gravitate towards, but I also have some clients who absolutely love it, and it's packed with fiber and nutrient density. I love adding avocado to a variety of things. I put it on tacos. Anytime I'm making like a grain bowl of any sort, I will almost always toss some sort of avocado on top of there. I love doing like the little avocado cups too, because you can freeze them so that they don't get brown like nearly as quickly as regular avocados. And they're perfect every single time. Like, they're never going to be bad because they come in those little cups. They're pre-sealed. A lot of the times they have a little bit of citric acid in there to help to reduce that browning. So just a super easy way to like add in some more fats without having to worry about your avocados going bad in 2 seconds, because I swear I will touch my avocado one day and it's hard as a rock, and then the next day I'll touch it and it'll be like way too squishy to even use, and the whole thing has went brown. Avocados are one of those like very finicky things. And then in terms of like, I always cook with olive oil. Sometimes I'll cook with avocado oil too. It kind of just depends on what we have on hand, but most of the time I'm cooking with olive oil. And then I also love making different sorts of trail mixes, especially with popcorn. So one of my like favorite go-to snacks is popcorn with pistachios and then dark chocolate. But you could do literally any nut. You could do peanuts, you could do cashews, you could do any sort of nut that you like. I like pistachios because not only do they have healthy fats, but they're also a complete source of protein. Plus, they're freaking delicious. If you've never had pistachios, I highly recommend trying them. But those are some of my favorite ways to like add healthy fats into my diet a little bit more, because I will say I was also someone who, I feel like I really didn't eat that many healthy fats for a long time. And so over the period of time, I've really started to increase the consumption of healthy fats that I have. Oh my gosh, I almost forgot one of the most important benefits, you guys. I just thought about it because it's part of that, how I got my period back. So Healthy fats are also incredibly important for us as females in terms of our hormone production. So cholesterol is the precursor to estrogen and progesterone. So essentially the two sex hormones for us as females that help with the fluctuations of our menstrual cycle. That's why if you've ever struggled with infertility or if you've ever lost your period before, you'll oftentimes hear people emphasize increasing the amount of healthy fats that you're consuming, because not only does it help with that hormone production, but it also helps to make sure that you're getting enough total energy, because it is that like 9 calorie per gram rather than those lower calorie things like carbohydrates or protein. So it's going to increase your energy consumption, and it's also going to help with the production of those hormones. I can't believe I almost forgot about that. That's like one of my favorite things to talk about when it comes to healthy fats for us as females, because I feel like we especially are the ones who are typically more scared of them. However, there's something that is literally so beneficial for us as women. So I know that this was a little bit of a shorter episode today, but I just wanted to take a little bit of time to like go back to the basics. And I'm kind of thinking about making this into a series where I talk about like how to eat rather than how to diet. I think the blood sugar episode really players into that really well too. So if you've never listened to that one, highly recommend going back and listening to that one as well. But I just wanted to give an overview of what all of the macronutrients are, how they benefit your body in a positive way, and some different ways that you can add them into your diet. So once again, that's carbohydrates, protein, and fat, and you need all three in order to have a well-balanced diet. Don't cut out those carbs. Don't only focus on protein, and make sure that you're increasing the amount of healthy fats that you're having as well, because think about all of the benefits that I just listed. And that's something that really helps me when I'm building balance plates or power pack snacks. I just remind myself of all of the ways that incorporating all of these different macronutrients play into my body in such different ways, and like how cool nutrition actually is when you think about it at that basic level. Like food is literally doing so much for us, and all we think about is like how food negatively impacts us, which is why I love talking about the benefits that can come from food. As always, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you guys so much. If you found like this episode was helpful, please feel free to share it with a friend. And as always, I love you guys. Thank you for being a part of this community. And I am so excited to talk to you next week. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of Simply Balanced. Thank you so much for tuning in and sharing a part of your day with me. I hope you find inspiration in our discussion and feel more equipped to embrace the balanced girl aesthetic in your daily life. Remember, balance is a journey, not a destination. It's about finding what works for you in your unique way. As we part ways, I encourage you to reflect on one thing you learned today and how you can incorporate that into your life to create more balance. Don't forget to subscribe to Simply Balanced so you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed our time together, consider leaving a review or sharing the podcast with a friend. Your support means the world, and until next time, keep striving for balance, nourish your body and mind, and remember to cherish life's simple pleasures. This is Taylor Grasso signing off. Stay balanced and see you next episode.